Welcome, Craig. Welcome to season 4 of Travel Connections. Thank you so much for coming back on my podcast. I really appreciate it.
Well, it's not like I don't see you often, but it's good to be back.
Yes, I know that. But the only time you've been on the podcast was one time last year around this time when we talked about our trip to South Africa with Collette.
That's right. I remember that was an incredible trip, and I know we're going to talk about another one today.
We are. And the interesting thing about this is that one of the many interesting things about this is that I was going to do this kind of as a solo episode. And you and I got to talking about just the trip and how great it was. And I thought it's so much more fun to talk about it and banter kind of back and forth and remembering details when there's two of us than me just reciting how wonderful a trip was. So
yeah, I know you love reliving the trips over and over. And I think there's been so many of them that it becomes hard to do that. But yeah, I'd love to do it.
Is there really anything wrong with reliving a trip? Isn't that what travel is about? I mean, what is the purpose of travel? To go back over it in your head and remember and savor all the details? I don't know. Do you look at travel differently?
No. I think, of course, there's nothing wrong. I think for me, travel benefits include just breaking away from everyday life and then seeing parts of the world that you're either unfamiliar with or that you need to explore deeper. So no, of course not. It's amazing to be able to get out and see things.
I'm just teasing you. After 40 years, I think we know how to do this. I think some people listen to our podcast episodes just to hear the Craig and Suzanne show. So if you're smiling people, you will not be disappointed. I'm sure we will come up with something entertaining for you. So this trip, we planned almost a year in advance to go to Paris and London. I should say it in order. London and Paris at Christmas time, at the holidays. Now, I don't know that everyone is on board with holiday travel because it's supposed to be busy and crazy and there's so many people. But I have to tell you, I thought it was phenomenal. What is your first impression of traveling literally on Christmas Day?
Yeah, I mean, I think we need to back into that. I think that you and I have talked about traveling at the holidays for years. When you have kids at home, you can't do it.
No.
As they leave the nest, it becomes easier. I think my company closes down between Christmas and New Year's. So that opens up that opportunity. And so for the last 5-6 years, we've been doing this. I think you fast forward to actually leaving on the 25th. I would tell you this is the first time we've done that. But I would also say it's like a little fraternity of people that have all discovered it's the most amazing time to fly, right? And you feel it's a little empty leaving on Christmas Day, and the airport feels kind of odd. But I have to tell you, an incredible experience, and I hope to do it more often.
Right. Well, we have traveled at the holidays before. We've been to Australia on New Year's. We did a wonderful trip to Edinburgh and Dublin at New Year's. And actually, I did a podcast on the Edinburgh and Dublin one. I highly recommend listening to that. I thought it was great. But this one with London and Paris and lights, and you told me later that wasn't necessarily your two top. Which was the city that you weren't sure you wanted to go to?
Yeah, I think you and I have been fortunate enough to have visited London. I've been to London 10 times and Paris 5, 6, 7 times.
Right.
But we haven't really been in a while where we could explore the city and take the kind of vacation trip where you've got the time to walk the streets and cafes and to soak in museums. 4 days of just that leisure kind of approach. I think it was amazing. But yeah, I went into it looking more forward to London. And I can tell you honestly that I was quickly reminded of how beautiful Paris is. And it stood out as the highlight to me.
Yeah, that's so fun to hear. Well, okay, so we'll jump back to literally flying on Christmas Day. Everyone is in a good mood. There's no one at the airport. I don't want to say no one, but there was no one in the TSA line. And it just seems so easy. Everyone is in a good mood. We ended up using mileage tickets and we ended up being able to get great seats because we were traveling on Christmas Day.
Right.
And what were you going to say?
I hope nobody listens to this and takes that advice, because to be bumped up to business on miles is ridiculous, right?
Exactly.
And it's just incredible. And I think, and just to take advantage of that time, so you're adding that extra day or two by leaving on the 25th.
Mhm.
Yeah, it's a great experience.
Yeah, it was wonderful. So we started in London, and, I had like a sweater on that said holiday. I was like all in on this trip because, like you mentioned before, you literally, every time we travel, you are working at the same time. And this is the only time your business is shut down, where you don't have a phone call, you don't have a Zoom meeting. And so you do get to relax. And this wasn't a long trip. We did 4 nights in London and 4 nights in Paris, which doesn't sound like a lot, but it turned out to be just the perfect number of days for each city. If in fact if you've never been there, you might need a little more time, because we didn't have to do the touristy things because we've been there before. So to me, it was the lights. I've never seen lights like we saw in London.
Yeah, I think if you look at London, and if you've never been, you're going to want to go to places like Buckingham Palace and Hyde Park. Having been there so many times, we don't need to do those in the same fashion. Happy to walk through it and buy it and check the list. I also think the time of year is critical, because so many Americans travel to Europe in the summer. You have your crowds, you get the heat and humidity. You go there in December, it was cold, but it was amazing. And even for the holidays, you're still getting the influx of people coming into the city. So it's not like you're walking into, an uncrowded, changed environment. But it was just amazing time of year to be there, to see it differently than we have before.
Well, and that's the way I thought of it too. We did I did a lot of research looking at who has the most festive lights, who's decorated their stores. We went to all the big department stores. We went to the Christmas market. We did amazing restaurants. We did go to the portrait gallery this time, and I don't know if we'd ever been there before. Do you recall being there before?
I don't believe we have. And ironically, that was a highlight for me as well. And I think you and I are legendary for blowing through museums in less than an hour and checking the box.
Don't tell everybody that, but that's true.
But when you've been to the Louvre 5 times, it's like, okay. Right. And I think what made this different was latching on to some of the tours where you had scholars who studied these artists, explain what was happening at that time. That made it fascinating. I think we were in that museum for 4 hours, and that's not what you and I do. And it was amazing. So maybe the lesson learned is private tours, but it was amazing.
Well, it was remarkable, and I'm really excited that we went. And then we discovered the lights were extraordinary. And I don't even know if I can verbally do it justice, but they are 3D, because for example, in the shopping area, you had Dior and Gucci, and they do everything up really big. Fordham and Mason was really cool. That's one of my favorite places to visit. It's like 7 stories tall, and it has different food shops on every single level. But the front of it was like an advent calendar, and it was red and it had numbers on the windows. It was out of a fairy tale, out of a storybook. I just love that. And what you and I did is we took the time, we kind of rushed through life a lot because we have a lot of things to do, but to just walk everywhere and see these holiday decorations, I thought it was amazing.
I think you and I have evolved heavily into this whole culinary world the last 40 years. And so Fordham and Mason was something I actually enjoyed as well. Knowing how much you love it, but also just being there is incredible. I think the oldest bookstore in London, you loved that. And it's fun for me to take you there. But I'm smiling too, because anyone who follows your Instagram account will see the Dior, the Louis Vuitton, and Chanel, all those, the wrapping and lights outside.
Yeah.
Fun, but probably did enough of that.
Well, I mean, we specifically went to soak up the holiday cheer and holiday spirit, which is what we did. And London does it so big.
I agree.
And I mean, these stores just do an incredible job. But going to the oldest bookstore in London, I think they opened in 16 something or early 1700s. And then I don't know if I told you, but I was reading a book called Christmas with the Queen. And it actually took place in the 50s in London. And the characters went to that bookstore that you and I visited. And I love that it kind of went full circle, that I was there and I was reading this book about Christmas and the Queen. And it was a fun way to enjoy a book.
Well, when we walk Rocco later today, you can tell me that plot line in case we run out of other things to talk about.
Oh, yeah, because we never have enough things to talk about. But, okay, so the lights were amazing. I will say it was very crowded in London. You definitely have to have dinner reservations really anywhere you go.
Yeah. Look, you did a great job of that. You talked to friends of ours who just to get their insight on what are the bars you wanted to go to and what are the restaurants. And we plan this months in advance, which you have to. And that's the lesson to be learned here for sure. You can't just show up there and think the concierge is going to get you in or open table well, right? But yeah, I mean, I think it was just set up beautifully to experience a lot of different kinds of cuisine and different environments. So I thought it was amazing.
In the cocktail bars, well, the Churchill bar, which happened to be in our hotel, was this woodsy leather chairs, dark paneled wood, and handcrafted ice cubes, and it was just so awesome. And you're smiling, so many of the bars were like that, that were recommended to us. I just love that. I just thought it was very cool. It felt very like we were a couple, and it was like the perfect trip for a couple. Did you feel that?
Yeah, totally. Yeah, it was amazing. And I think too, the hotel was fantastic just to have that attached to it. But there were so many instances where we went to little bars like that or restaurants and had that experience that I think epitomizes London.
Well, remember, so we went to Covent Garden. We went specifically to different areas of the city so we could see their lights. It was quite crowded there. And as we were walking by, we went to the Oysterman. Is that what it was called, I think? And we just kind of lucked into a reservation, and we went in and had clam chowder and bread and oysters. And we talked to this lovely couple from Puerto Rico that were sitting next to us. And that was really fun too. They were kind of on a boondoggle as well.
Yeah.
And enjoying London for a while. And then they were going off to Spain. They were going to be gone longer than us. But I loved that aspect of what we were doing.
But I think too, that's another lesson, which is you have to embrace people on these trips. And, if I think of the times we've done that years ago in Saint-Remy in France, a dinner with people we'd never met, playing boules, their version of bocce ball, and just talking to people from around the world, or the social dinner that we had in Rome a summer ago, just learning about other people and talking about where we live. And to sit there at that table and to have the wine recommended and which oysters stood out, and to talk about their lives splitting time between Kansas City and Puerto Rico, not a common mix. It's just incredible to do that. And I think it turned out to be one of the food highlights of London, at least.
And we had no idea. And I love that too. I mean, sometimes we break away from the plan. Yeah. We might change our mind or decide that we've had too much of one kind of food. And so then we switch and try something else. But we got really lucky. We went to the Stavert for high tea. And I will thank you so much for doing that. That is not your favorite thing to do. I talked about that when we went to Edinburgh. We went to high tea as well. And I loved it. You were under the weather at the Stavert. And you were so kind to go anyways. But it was a holiday.
We were talking about this.
You don't have to. We're not going to go down that road on how ill you really were. But you're such a good husband. And I had a lovely
I can only tell anybody listening that when you have food poisoning and you have to sit in a room where everybody's having massive pieces of roast beef carved off all around you, it is a struggle, but I think we can just leave it there.
Okay, we'll leave it there. So let's talk about how we got from London to Paris.
Yeah.
And not everyone is that familiar with it, but we took the high-speed train from London to Paris. I bought the tickets way in advance. Hello. At that time of year, you really have to do a lot of things way in advance. So I did. I reserved seats. But what was interesting for me is we've taken trains, many times before, but this one was very specific about check-in. I think our train was at 12:30, let's say, and it said, make sure you check in no later than 11:15. And I thought, what's that about?
Yeah.
Oh, what happened when we got to the train station?
Yeah. So it's interesting. I think, first of all, we did it with the kids, 15 plus years ago. Mm-hmm. And that's what was called the channel, which we now understand is...
Now understand people don't say that anymore.
Yeah. Okay. So whatever. Yeah. I think, we did go to the train station at the time recommended. When we walked in, I think you and I were amazed. We got in a line that had a few hundred people in it. And that was...
Oh, no, darling. Not a few hundred. I want to say 700 or 800. It took us 45 minutes. We wound all the way around that way, then to the right, then to the left. Then we came around until we could just check in. I've never seen it like that.
In fairness, a few could be more than 2 or 3, but yes, okay, let's say 700.
Okay, so you're going to have some answers, right?
But here's what I would say too. I don't know what first class would have cost, but we had great, upgraded seats.
Yeah, there was 3 levels, I think, like standard, middle, and top. And so I took the middle, not really knowing. I really liked that. And it was very calm.
It was amazing. But for the top level, you don't have to wait in that line. And
that's right.
That's a whole different deal. So
Thank you for reminding me.
And you're only under the sea for like 15, 20 minutes, or something like that.
Yeah.
I mean, you go into it thinking, oh my God, that's going to be a couple hours underwater. And it's not at all. It's very quick. And then you get to see a lot of the countryside outside of Paris heading into town. So amazing. Yeah, I love doing it. Much more fun than flying, and a lot easier dealing with airport check-in.
You know what? I feel the same way. And once you're on the train, it was very calm. You get a couple hours. I think it's like 2 hours and 15 minutes. And you're just calm, or you rest or sleep or read or, listen to a podcast. Something like that. But when we arrived in Paris, I was kind of shocked at the number of bodies in that station also.
But I feel like you're 700 people converged upon the taxi stand at the same time. Mm-hmm. You've got a day before New Year's Eve, so then you're beginning to celebrate. Mm-hmm. I just think all of that conspired to make that an unusually heavy traffic time, but it worked out. If it took us 40 minutes in taxi line to get in and go, not the end of the world, but it's just so great to be there.
It was fun to be there. And like you said, we have been fortunate. We've been there in the heat of the summer. We've been pretty much in the heat of the summer every time we visited, I think. We were there in November when we went on the Viking cruise, also a podcast episode, just so you know. We took a cruise from Paris to Normandy and back. Highly recommend the Viking cruise. It was extraordinary. And so you get a little bit of time in Paris. And so we just kind of bucked around, but it was cold in November.
But not as cold as what we experienced this time.
No, it was pretty cold.
But still, it was incredible time to be there. Yeah. Sorry?
The dryness, we got super lucky. It did not rain in London. Maybe it sprinkled. And it did not rain, relatively speaking, in Paris either. It was windy. It was windy in Paris. But, I was talking with someone recently about winters in the Northwest. And really, if you have the right apparel, cold weather is not really a problem unless it's, in the negative numbers or whatever. But if you're resting in the 30s somewhere and you've got a hat and scarf and coat, you're fine. And the right footwear, I do think that's important.
Yeah. I mean, you prep for that more than I do. And that's fine. I will say that you talk about planning in advance, being on the Eiffel Tower on New Year's Day, very cool, very special.
I did that.
We didn't buy our tickets far enough in advance to use the elevator, so we had to use the stairs.
This is true. So
Yeah.
I had this brilliant idea to go up in the Eiffel Tower. And, on January 1st, new beginnings. I love the idea. It was quite cold that day, quite windy. But did you know it gets windier as you go up the Eiffel Tower?
It does. So when you're in that cold and the wind, you wish you had the elevator pass.
Correct.
But still very cool. And that's the next tip, plan in advance, right?
That is, get those way in advance. But what we did not know is that you don't have to walk back down the stairs, that there is an elevator that takes you down. And we kind of stumbled on that. We were trying to find our way to go back down.
I think you and I both felt we were breaking a rule doing it. But I think later we understood, no, it's the only way down, which is great.
Right.
Yeah.
They don't make you go down. They allow you an elevator to go down. But
exactly.
Just the views up there were incredible. And they had this igloo thing on the second level that had a bar inside, and they had snacks and different things. And you could have kept going to a different level, which we didn't choose to do. It was like, this is good enough. Right. And 30 degrees with strong winds. We're like, yeah, this is
exactly.
So that was a highlight. We also did a couple other new things. Well, not new to us. We went to the Musée d'Orsay.
Right.
We did not do that in 1 hour. We were there much longer. Also got tickets in advance. That is huge. There were a bajillion people outside that museum.
Yeah, and it was raining that day, so it was beautiful to not wait, right? But
good point. I forgot.
You and I have been to the Musée d'Orsay a handful of times.
Mm-hmm.
And I think we both find it to be one of our favorite, probably because we like Impressionist art so much.
Mm-hmm.
I think they're like one of the largest collections in the world of Impressionist art.
I think so. Yeah.
Beautiful, incredible to see it. So really fun to go back and just to see different things and relive those that you remember. So no, I loved going there.
I loved it too. We also went to their Christmas market, also a surprise. So we ended up, because we kind of slowed this trip down and we weren't over scheduling everything, that we did a lot of walking, but I don't want to say aimless walking, but we walked to things and then discovered things along the way. So we were going to, I might butcher this name, De Hillerin, which is a cooking store, a very famous old cooking store, the kind of place that has copper pots that are all lined up. And it's really a cook's store. It's not like a Williams-Sonoma where it's, refined and splashy. It's like practical cooking tools. So we were on our way there and then stumbled into the Paris Christmas market. I have to tell you, that's one of the best I've ever seen.
Yeah, I thought it was great. I mean, we liked the one here in Seattle. I thought that was kind of fun, and it reminded me of that. Mm-hmm. I think the one in Paris is great, right? You look at all the foods. Again, I couldn't eat because I was sick, but amazing to see that.
I shouldn't be laughing. I'm sorry. It was bad. It was bad for you.
But I think this too, you talk about museums. I went to the Dior Museum because you asked me to.
Correct.
I really didn't want to go.
No.
And I really, even pulling up to it, was completely disinterested.
You hit it pretty well.
I have to tell you, it was impressive, right? And I don't know anything about high fashion. I don't look at a Dior purse that an actress wore in the 50s, and I can't, that's not an association I make. But walking in there and seeing his life and seeing how the business progressed and the floors of just all that they've accomplished, I would say that to any male listening, it's certainly not as painful as I thought it would be, but it's actually surprisingly interesting. So, and I think if they could hear this at the Dior Museum, they'd be like,
yeah, I mean, they'd be like, please don't let Craig Stavert describe our museum. Thank you very much.
I'm just saying, to try to maintain my masculinity, I thought it was pretty cool, right?
I don't think that it's in jeopardy at all. I think you're okay if you went to that museum. I think we're safe.
Yeah.
It's called La Galerie Dior, and it's in the old Dior House of Dior.
Yeah.
And I expect a good friend of mine, Angela, and another good friend of mine, Karen, both went and really liked it. And
Yeah.
it was kind of at the back of my mind thinking, I really like to see, I really want to see this. And I was going to kind of push you into going no matter what, which is kind of what I did.
Yeah.
And I was blown away at the detail and the creative expression and the way they displayed everything.
Yeah.
The
I agree.
history. I learned so much about Christian Dior. I learned about the subsequent designers that did design for Dior. They had they had gowns, they had dresses, they had photos of people in the dresses. They had a dress that Princess Diana wore. I remember that dress. You're not going to remember this dress, but it was a dress that was black and it almost looked like lingerie. It was not one of my favorite dresses that she wore. But to see a dress that Diana, with the picture of her and with the dress there, I thought that was really cool. There was another thing I enjoyed a lot was Marlene Dietrich was a big fan and friend of Christian Dior. And she was going to do a movie, and the name of the movie is escaping me. But she said, no, and she was trying to negotiate to get Christian Dior to do the costumes for this movie. And she said, no Dior, no Dietrich. And I just love the power of that, think, I'm not going to do your silly movie unless I have the right costume. So, and that was
it was impressive. It was impressive.
It
was impressive.
And it was colorful and it didn't take too long. And it was all these pluses. The only thing I kind of regret is that I have heard later after coming home that the cafe there, I did take some photos. There's a Dior cafe that's in the museum. And they had beautiful like pastries and chocolates, and I'm sure they sold all kinds of different food. I wish we would have eaten there or had a snack or had a latte with like some fancy design on top.
Latte art.
What's that?
I'll remind you too that the person who told us that was someone who we met at the hotel, the Park Hyatt. And what she had said was a lot of the museums are actually known for their cafes. Mm-hmm. And it's a thing where they compete and they try to one up each other. I had no idea. And it's so French, right? To do that.
It's so French. But, and Louis Vuitton has a cafe there too. But again, that time of year is rough because there are so many people.
Right. Yeah. Look, it's great to know that when we go to these, it's something we should try to definitely experience. But I had no idea.
No. So we have two more things we have to talk about before we go. And one is Notre Dame. So Notre Dame is now open. It is a tough ticket to get. We were not able to go inside. I'm not sure I would have been able to tell the difference on, the renovation or not. But to see the enthusiasm of people, and they put up these stands where you can literally just sit in the stands and look at it.
Yeah.
That was exciting, wasn't it?
I think so. My business is devoted to project management around building bridges, building buildings, what have you. And when you look at that project, so forget the origin of what caused the destruction. I mean, that's up for interpretation. Mm-hmm. But if you look at the project, they actually gave it to the military to manage. And the military delivered on time and under budget. And that is a rarity. Mm-hmm. So when you look at that, that just makes it all the more amazing. And to restore it to the state that it was prior, so you really don't miss a step. And I'm sure purists will notice small things, but I'm just saying it's an incredible endeavor and accomplishment. And it's great to see that it's returning back to that city.
Well, and I remember when the fire happened, I cried. I mean, I know, millions of other people did, but it was so sad that it happened, but it was so exciting. And there was so much joy in the air surrounding, just walking on the island and just walking near it. You just felt it. It was palpable. So that was amazing. And I think the crowds, I think it will go down as time passes, and it won't, it had just opened on, I want to say December 8th, something like that, close to that. And we were there only a couple weeks later. So it was a very popular attraction. I want to touch on staying at the Park Hyatt because it was a really special experience. And the people that worked there I was so endeared to them that I just feel like we need to give them a shout out to just talk about it because it's a very special place. It's not for everyone. It is pricey, but oh my gosh, I loved it so much.
But I think you and I have been loyal to the Hyatt brand for 30 years. And I think, if you follow the points people in your business that are knowledgeable in that discipline, it is beneficial to leverage your time and investment into one airline and one hotel because it pays dividends over time. And, as such, we've stayed in like 150 different properties around the country and the world. When I look at the Park Hyatt, it's just the finest of the finest, right? And I think that you feel it from the minute you walk in. The level of service is incredible, not because they're attentive, which they are, but because they're personable, right? And I think the people, endeared, I think is the word you used. The people we, got to know for 4 days, incredibly endeared. From the concierge who would pivot our dinner reservations to getting your Dior tickets to having the gin and tonics at 5 before going to dinner. I mean, the whole experience it's just incredible. And there isn't anybody that wouldn't enjoy it.
I know. We did this. I still think about it. So we had a fairly large breakfast in the morning. We have a beautiful buffet. And then, so you're kind of hesitant about eating 3 big meals a day. So we would try to eat a little bit lighter in the late afternoon. And so it was very cold. So I would have a cup of tea, a cup of Earl Grey tea, and then we would share a club sandwich. That's what it's called, a club sandwich. And this tiny little bowl we called them French fries. And Thomas said, they're not French fries, they're frites.
And you touch on that. So Thomas was the guy that we really got to know the most. I think our first day, we had some wonderful people. And they handed us off to Thomas. And he has a dry sense of humor as we do. He couldn't have been more personable or kind. And we made fun of each other's cultures, together. And I just think that it's the personalities that make these trips so unbelievable.
Exactly. And so memorable. We're still talking about, the people we met along the way and the lovely experiences people gave to us. But I don't know. To circle back, would you do a Christmas Day departure again? Would you do these 2 busy cities all over again?
Yeah, 100%. We will leave on Christmas Day as often as we can.
Yeah.
And I think that would I do these 2 cities? Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there's others I'd like to go to first.
Sure.
But I don't want to wait, 5 years to go to London again as we did this time. So, and I think too, when you're going to other parts of Europe, connecting to Italy through, let's say, Dublin or London, planning a day or 2 out, not a bad idea to do that. I know we're going to Morocco in April, and I think it's healthy to have a day or 2 like that to get acclimated and then make that next step a little bit easier.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
Well, I certainly appreciate you coming on Travel Connections and talking about our amazing trip to London and Paris. I'm going to add some more details and links to restaurants we went to. You and I didn't even touch on that. I really wanted people to just get a feel of our enthusiasm about traveling at the holidays. I know it's February, but you have to plan these things, especially if you're going to use points. You can't just decide in November, hey, I want to travel at the holidays and use miles and points. It doesn't work that way.
You got to commit early, and early it's the first calendar quarter of a year.
Correct. Yeah. I totally agree. Well, will you come back and talk about our incredible trip to Patagonia that we just went to in October?
Well, if you can find me, I'd be more than happy to come back.
Okay. Well, thank you. Yeah, we're not going to make a huge habit of this, but these 2 trips, I really, really wanted your input and to be able to do this with you. So thank you.
I love doing it. I love what you're doing on this podcast. So thank you.
Thank you, dear. I'll see you up in the kitchen.
I'll see you.
Okay. Bye.